Wedding anniversaries, take priority.
Yes.
Second anniversary, huh?
Yeah.
Well, happy anniversary.
Thank you so much.
All right, we're glad to have everyone here. I don't think Vincent's online, but you'll get the link so you can watch it. We will, in the second hour, be looking at a video, a short video, it's 15 or 16 minutes. I'm going to show it on that wall, so you can't see that wall. I was going to show it over here, but I couldn't find a plug-in close enough. So this is what we got. I am going to be gone the first 2 weeks of October. I'll be in Russia. So we're going to sort of have a class anyway. I can't record from Russia because I can't promise. I don't know that I'll have internet access or Wi-Fi access. So I can't pre-record because Miss Mavis doesn't have a computer to watch it on. So what we're going to do is there's a book called Studies in the Life of Christ by R.C. Foster. Google it. You can find it on a PDF file. It's free. Mine wasn't free. I paid for mine a long time ago. But I want you to read, and I'll tell you this again before the time comes, but I want you to read pages 338 to 773. It's a big chunk of reading, but it's 4 hours of class to cover. I figured that'll pretty much cover it. It's a really good book. Once you download it, if you have opportunity to read the whole thing, that'd be great. But for those 2 weeks in October, I want you to read those pages to keep us up to date in the class. We can't get a substitute in. Tommy can't do it because he's teaching another class. So the option is to read this book, or at least that portion of the book. And Miss Mavis, I'll get you a paper copy, or either that or loan you my book.
Okay.
But if you don't bring my book back, somebody can get hurt. Oh no. Because it's free now, you can get it on a PDF file. I don't guess I need the book anymore, but I've had it for a long time. I hate to lose it. But that's what we're going to. It's Stephen Foster's. No, I'm sorry. Did I say Stephen Foster? R.C. Foster. Studies in the Life of Christ. And if you Google that, you'll get maybe 2 or 3 links to a PDF file, and maybe one on there that tries to charge you. Don't pay for it. Go to a site that you can get it for free. Download it on your computer. It won't cost you a thing. You can read it from that. Last week, we talked about, I think it's last week, some of the scholars that wrote during the first, second, third centuries, what we call the church fathers. I pulled these 2 books out of the library just now just to show you. This is one that's called the Ante-Nicene Fathers that made before the Nicene Creed. They wrote. These are just men who were considered scholarly, who were believers in Christ, who wrote whatever treatise they were writing. And the other one's called the Nicene and Post-Nicene Fathers, and that means during the time of the Nicene Creed and afterward. Now there's another book, another series of books. This is like a third volume set. There's tons and tons of material. Not all is trustworthy. I'm not saying you can go to these books and say, oh, these guys know what they're talking about. But these were guys who wrote back during that time. You can get a gauge of what people were thinking and believing about Christ. 1500, 1700 years ago. You'll find that the major controversy that they're going to discuss, that nobody ever got it right, still don't have it right today, is over the incarnation of Jesus. Was he God or was he man? And it's just a huge, it's just a debate that's never been settled, and people take wrong views on it and develop whole theologies on their wrong view because they can't believe that God would come into a man's body because they are thinking, sorry, they are thinking that, or believing that the body is sinful and therefore God can't come into a sinful body. So they developed the theology that Mary was miraculously conceived, and Jesus was miraculously conceived without the aid of man, a male person. And so you have all these doctrines that they have to keep. It's like, I can't think of an analogy, but well, like lies. You got to cover up. Get one lie to cover up that lie, to cover up that lie, to cover up that lie. Well, I won't call them liars. I think they are terribly deceived, and they teach and believe things that are just contrary to the Bible in order to explain to their mind how it could happen. And there are some things you just got to accept by faith. I can't explain in my mind how God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. I can't tell a scientist how that happened. Does that mean I don't believe it happened? No, but I know that it happened. I just can't necessarily explain it. I don't have to explain, understand fully exactly how he was 100% God, how he was 100% man. We're going to talk about, not tonight, but in future lessons, we're going to talk about the temptations of Jesus. That just throws people for loops. How can he be tempted? He's God. God cannot be tempted. But Jesus was tempted. Or if he wasn't tempted, if he just, Satan said here, it's like somebody tempted me to eat a mud pie. It's not a temptation. You're not tempting me to eat mud pie because I'm not eating mud pie. That's right. So some people see it, that's the kind of temptation. Well, if that's what it wasn't a temptation. The Bible specifically says it's a temptation. So either Jesus was tempted or he was not. And if he was tempted, how does that deal with the doctrine of God cannot be tempted? We'll talk about that. I'll go ahead and bring it up now. We'll muddle over for it's going to be probably a couple of weeks before we get to that. But at any rate, because they can't explain it, they develop doctrines that attempt to explain but end up making a bigger mess of it. And that's what a lot of those things books do. Now, I'm not saying everything about it's bad, but there are some things, the Nicene Creed itself, a document that was made up by men. And it actually will deal with the Jesus being a man, Jesus being God. They struggle with it. So, covered Life of Christ. Vincent, are you there? I think I heard you come on.
I am here.
There you are. You're driving.
Can you hear me?
Man, you're driving. You scare me. I can hear you. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Scaring me, man.
All right. I'm not going to be able to participate a whole lot, but I will hear.
Okay. All right.
All right.
I was just telling the class that I'm going to be gone the first 2 weeks of October. I'll be in Russia. I'm giving you an assignment to read, but I'll tell you about that later. You can read it or hear it on the video later. I'll send you more information about it. I don't want to disturb your driving. The guy's driving.
Yes, sir.
He's a bigger man than I am. All right. Now, Vincent, it's a good thing that you're driving because you won't be able to watch our video tonight. I can't show you the video. I'll just pause I'll pause you out of it during that time. I wish I could show it to you, but for conscience sake, I cannot. I don't want to violate anybody's copyrights. Let's begin.
All right, no problem.
Let's begin with a word of prayer. Father, we thank you so much for the day that you've given us. We thank you, Father, for those who have survived the different hurricanes and the fires out west. And we ask your blessings upon those who continue to suffer from the damages that were brought to them. Help us, Father, as your church here in this world, that we can shine brightly during this time to let the people know this world, let them know of your love and your mercy, your compassion. We ask, Father, that you be with us tonight as we study the teachings of your son, the work and life of your son. We pray that these teachings will help us to understand him better, to understand you better, to draw closer to you, and then in the end, be a better light to you in the community, that your name may be glorified. We ask, Father, that you forgive us of our failures and encourage us in our strength. In Christ's name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
I pulled a few weeks ago a commentary off my shelf, an old commentary from back in the 1800s. It once belonged to my wife's grandfather. I opened up the cover, and written inside was this list: orange juice, canned meat, sweet pickles, evaporated milk, and Jello. Now, if I were to give you that list and ask you to tell me something about the person or people who wrote that list, what would you say? I've got an advantage. I know my wife's grandparents, so I know the list actually fits in, or maybe I made it fit in because I know them. But anyway, the list actually fits in with what I think is their character. But if you were to see that list and try to, if you're an investigator, a crime scene investigator or something like that, and you're trying to discern something about this person or people who wrote the list: orange juice, canned meat, sweet pickles, evaporated milk, and Jello. What would you, what assumptions would you make? What would you say would be some characteristics of those people?
I said they were older person. Who was an older person.
Older. I don't know when he wrote it. I knew he was an older person, but I don't know when he wrote the list. But he lived in the old days.
Yeah, I lived in the old days. Mm-hmm.
What makes you say that?
The canned milk and the canned meat and evaporated milk.
Now, what about those two items makes you think it's from the old days?
Because we don't say canned meat
What
anymore.
do we say? Spam.
Spam.
That's exactly right. He didn't use name brand. No name brand. Got one name brand. I think I can explain that one. But there's no name brand. He said orange juice is just a kind. You normally wouldn't on orange juice. But canned meat, we don't say canned meat. We say spam. And we usually make fun of it because nobody eats spam. Nobody wants to admit to eat spam. We all eat spam when you don't want to tell everybody. The evaporated milk, what do we say?
Condensed milk.
Condensed milk? No, that's two more things, isn't it? There's sweetened condensed milk, and then there's evaporated milk, and that's called, what do we normally say when we're looking for that? Maybe it's just pet milk.
Pet milk.
It's the main brand.
Yeah,
It's been branded. There's different varieties of it, but he didn't say pet milk. He said evaporated milk. And what about the Jello? That doesn't fit in with my theory.
He didn't say what kind of Jello. So at that time, I think it was just Rex Jello.
You know, Jello back then was the only one. There wasn't other name brands. I mean, he wouldn't have. There weren't any other options, I guess. But Jello was it, and it has so branded itself. It's like Xerox. I'm going to Xerox me a copy of this. Well, that's not right. Xerox is a brand, but we use it. The stuff they did so well with their advertising and pushing of the material that, Purex was the word for bleach. Right. We didn't say bleach, we said Purex. Right. The same thing with Jello. And I know the place where he or she, I'm saying he because it's his book, where he shopped out there in the country, and they wouldn't have had anything else but Jello on the shelf. That's all he would have known is Jello. So from the list, I would gather that he's country folk, that he's from a time before brands were popular, or he was of such a financial state that he didn't use the big name brand. Spam is going to cost you more than canned meat. And what was the other one? Pet milk is going to cost you more than just a generic can of evaporated milk. They were frugal people, so they were going to buy the non-name brands. It speaks something of their financial status. The orange juice, orange juice is orange juice. I guess it was probably the most luxurious thing on the list. Orange juice is not something everybody buys, but if you want it, you gotta have it.
But I
Sweet
think back
pickles.
then, it was frozen. You couldn't get it.
That frozen, you couldn't get it in the jug. That's right. It was only
It was in that little frozen.
what's it called? Condensed. Anyway, frozen orange juice. And that's usually how. Anyway, we can tell something about the person. We can tell something about the person looking at the list. Lists tell us a lot of things. And if you were to see a list, I put it on here, of ramen noodles, peanut butter, and mac and cheese, who's writing that list?
Somebody else did that.
College kid. It's cheap, it's quick, and it's filling. Nutrition is, I typed in college kids, Google to see what they say. And a lot of college kids today, they're trying to be apples and bananas and oranges and apples. College kids don't do that. They're going for what's cheap, what's quick, what's filling, not looking for nutrition. Maybe college kids are better today than they were.
They got a little bit more money now. Or they pay it to.
That's right. On the list is hamburgers, hamburger buns, charcoal, mayo, tomatoes, chips, Doritos. What do you know about that?
Oh, this person was a little bit of money.
You're going to have a picnic.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to have a get together, a cookout. The Bible has lots of lists. Typically, when we come up on those lists, what do? We flip the page. We don't look at the list. Genesis chapter 4 tells us or gives us a list of Cain's family. Genesis chapter 5 gives us a list of the names of the people in Seth's family. Genesis chapter 11 gives us a list of Abraham's family. You turn to the book of Leviticus, there's lists of sacrifices and lists of rules about how to make the sacrifices. In Numbers chapter 1, you find a list of the families who came out of Egypt. In Numbers chapter 26, you have a list of the families that were going into the land of Canaan, and the two weren't the same. Well, they were sort of. These were the kids of the ones that came out. The ones that came out, only two people went in. So there's two lists, one at the beginning, one at the end. In Ezra chapter 2, there's a list of people who came back from captivity with Zerubbabel to work on the temple foundation. In Ezra chapter 8, there's a list of people who came back with Ezra to try to work on the temple some more. Nehemiah chapter 3, there's a list of people who worked on rebuilding the wall. This. Why has God given us all these lists? I mean, these are inspired words, just as inspired as Acts 2:38 and Mark 16:15 and 16. What am I supposed to do with these lists? God gave them to us. There's some kind of importance to them. There's some kind of information that God wants us to have. And generally, when God writes something, when God has taken the trouble to have it written down as inspiration, we need to do something about this. Now, this class is not about what you should do with Nehemiah chapter 3. Nehemiah chapter 3 is a big old long list of names. It's got some things in there that are interesting, but probably more interesting to the Jews who were participating in their children and their children's children and so forth. But there's reason for these lists. But typically, when we come up on the list, those long list of names especially, we say, well, I'll go to chapter 4. Let me get past this list and get to the real story. Lists are boring. We don't like lists. So we come to Matthew chapter 1. That's why I'll ask you to turn your Bibles. Matthew chapter 1, we find this list. And we start reading that list and we say, and we skip down to what? Well, the story about the virgin birth. How many of you know any of the names on the list? Just without looking at it, do you know any of the names that are on the list? Can you name anybody that might be on that list? It's a list, it's a genealogical list of
I
Jesus.
think David is on that list.
David's on the list. Look at there, you got one. Abraham's on the list. He started out, doesn't he? Yes, we get the patriarchs, David. So if we sit down and think about it, not looking at the list, we sit down and think about it, we think the genealogy of Jesus. We try to trace it back to Abraham and Isaac and get Abraham. You're going to get Isaac and Jacob. And then we get those 12 boys. And who are they? Yeah, that's right. We don't remember the 12 boys unless we're actually studying about them in Genesis or Exodus or Leviticus. We don't remember their names. We thought real hard. We say, okay, Reuben's the firstborn. Then most of us don't remember Simeon. We remember Levi because of the Levites. Reuben, Simeon, Levi. And who's the fourth one? He's the main guy. You got to remember the main guy.
Not Joseph.
No. Judah. Judah. This is the one from whom Jesus will come. This is the important one as far as Matthew is concerned. I suppose others would say, other Jews might say others are more important or as important because they came from them. But as far as the biblical story, Judah is the one through whom Christ would come. So we're going to look at some of these names in these lists tonight. We're going to try to figure out why they're there, and I want to encourage you, when you are doing your daily Bible readings, when you're reading the Bible through in a year, don't skip the names. I know it's hard. Some of those names are just ridiculously long. You can't complain about anybody's name being ridiculously long.
That's an old name. My new name is short.
Okay. The names are difficult, and I don't think we should necessarily study each name, although if you have time, search it out and find out where a person else is mentioned in the Bible elsewhere. That'd be great, but don't skip the names. God wanted to honor those people. He put them in script. He put them in the holy scripture. Honor them by reading the names. If nothing else, just read through them. Become familiar with those people and who they were. And again, they're just as inspired as Mark 16, 15, and 16 and Acts 2:38. We need to know what God is trying to tell us with the list. Now, if you look at this list in Matthew 1, you'll very quickly see that they say it's the genealogical record of Jesus. The Jews knew about names and they knew about genealogical records. Genealogical records is how they proved that their inheritance. They were able to prove that a property that they lived on was theirs by these lists that they kept. You and I, we prove that we own the property that we have by what? We're going to deed, bill of sale. The car I have is mine. Well, how do I know it's yours? Well, I got a deed that says it's mine, or a bill of sale that says it's mine, or a horse that says it's mine. Well, the horse doesn't, but the paper does. And the house, it's either mine or my landlord's, but if it's my house, I got a bill of sale or a deed, or the bank has a deed that says it's theirs until I pay that last dime. But we have that means of telling what is not our inheritance, but our possession, the property that we live on. They didn't have a bill of sale. The Jews didn't, or at least they shouldn't have, because they weren't supposed to sell the land. They did. They weren't supposed to, and they ended up in trouble oftentimes because of it. But they weren't supposed to sell the land. They were supposed to pass it down from generation to generation so that everybody's name would be kept alive in Israel and have their inheritance in Israel. Sometimes they would get in a spot where they would have to sell the land, but God made a law for them. If you have to sell the land, after 50 years, your family gets it back. It's called what? Do I know that law? Or what that celebration is, or what that's it, the year of Jubilee. And on the year of Jubilee, every 50 years, there was a year of Jubilee. If you sold a piece of property on the 49th year, it's done good. You get it back in a year. But typically, somebody's not going to buy the land from you. They're not in the market for buying land when it's the 45th year of the year of Jubilee. But I can buy them the first year, and I can keep the property for 50 years. But after 50 years, according to Jewish law, I have to give it back. So that's how that worked out. We're supposed to work out. God made that preparation for them to prove your family was the original owner. When I say original owner, going back to the allotment that was given to them in one of those lists that we read about in the book of Joshua, the allotment that was given to them by tribe and by family, you take it all the way back to that. So you had to keep a list. You had to trace it all the way back to Joshua and the land of Canaan. Most of the lists weren't kept in people's homes because they didn't have room to keep that kind of thing. So they would keep them at a municipal place or in the city, a government official or something, or most likely, and actually supposed to, I think, or by, there's two kinds of Jewish laws. There's Jewish laws given to them by God, and there's Jewish laws that Jews make for themselves. And this is one that they make for themselves, I think, that they would keep it in the temple. And the Levites and the priests, remember, they were to keep those records. There was a clerk there, I suppose, that was, if you came to him and said, I got to prove that this is my property, can you pull my records for me? And then he would do that. So those lists would go all the way back to the 12 sons of Jacob, then they're on to Abraham and Isaac. But those Abraham and Isaac and Jacob would be obvious because all Jews came from those three patriarchs. And then you had to decide or had to know from which son you came of the sons of Jacob. And all the Jews knew which son they were from. There was no question that they who they were from. David knew that he was of the tribe of Judah, and it was stated that Paul, when he wrote in the I forget what the passage was, but he said, I am of the tribe of Benjamin. That's right. He's tribe of Benjamin. Now, Paul's lived in the New Testament times, but he knew of Benjamin, who had lived 1,500 years before him or more. More than 1,500 years. He said, I'm of the tribe of Benjamin. He was saying, I'm a pure stock of Israel. I can trace my lineage all the way back to Benjamin. All the priests, of course, knew that they were from Levi. You couldn't be a priest if you weren't from the tribe of Levi. But the families of Reuben, Issachar, Levi, Judah, all 12 tribes, the people knew which tribe or which family they came from, and they were each given a tribal inheritance, and that tribal inheritance was broken down by family of those who actually went in. That list of names that you find in Numbers 26. They were the ones who got the land parcels in the book of Joshua. It's a gift of God. It was to be kept in the family. Now, why don't they do that today? Jews don't do that today. They don't. You ask a Hebrew person or a Jewish person on the street, which son were you from? I don't know. How come we don't know? 70 AD. Rome came and destroyed Jerusalem. They ripped it apart. They destroyed all of it. No Jew knows his record. They passed 70 AD. I don't think any of them know it to them, but I know they can't trace their genealogy back to Benjamin or Levi or Simeon or Issachar or whoever, because all those records were destroyed. And that's God's work. God did it. Well, Romans did it, but God brought it about because he was bringing an end to that era. And that's one of the things that brought it to an end. Now, they keep trying to revive it, but they can't do it. They can't take it back to what it was. They can't go to Joshua, the book of Joshua, and say, well, our family got this parcel of land that belongs to me. I didn't know that. What family did you? Can't say it because they don't know. Anyway, Matthew begins here with a list of names. That's not uncommon for a Jew. And Luke doesn't start that way because, how far back can you trace your family? Know your grandfather? Yeah. Know your great-grandfather? Maybe. How about your great-great-great-great-grandfather? You know who he was? Most likely. I would don't do that. Now, there's websites now that you can pay money to get them to trace that back for you, and you just have to believe what they say. They're selling the product, and I have to understand they're selling the product. But anyway, I don't want to critique those people. Maybe they know what they're doing, maybe they don't. Maybe they're just making money and trying to get a way to do it, like those folks selling pet rocks back in the 70s. But people bought it. People bought it. Matthew wrote to a Jewish audience. They knew about keeping names. This starting out his gospel with a list of names. It did not phase in one bit whatsoever. It wasn't odd to them. In fact, it's quite proper. You're going to give me the life and times of somebody that's Jewish. You're going to have to start out by telling them where he came from. It's important to know where he came from. How far back can he trace his Jewish lineage? And so, when Jesus grows up, if he needs to make any claims about his ancestry, he's going to have to be able to prove it. And Matthew is here showing that Jesus can prove it, not just to us, but to those Jewish people to whom he wrote not long after Jesus died. Jesus did make a claim about his ancestry. He wasn't claiming property, but he did make a claim about his ancestry. When you turn to the book of John, he claims he is the Son of God. But when you turn here to the book of Matthew, he says, I am the son of David. And that meant something. That's a big deal. You make either claim, son of God or son of David, in the Jewish mind at that point, it was pretty much synonymous, maybe not synonymous, but they were pretty weighty things to say. Blasphemy to say you're the son of God. But if you say you're the son of David, you're a descendant of David, that means you have potential right to the throne of Israel. And so that was a big deal to claim to be son of David, because God promised David that the king I'm going to bring into the world, when I'm ready, he's going to come from your loins, to say you're a son of David. In Jesus' time, when they were looking for the Messiah, they were anticipating, this is the time he's going to come. Somebody said, well, I'm son of David. Oh, let's check the genealogical record. Make sure. And you may be the one. There are many people who were claiming to be Messiah. I don't know if they were descendants of David or not, and I don't know what proved them to be false messiahs, other than the fact that they weren't. But Matthew writes it down here for us. It's a record the Romans could not destroy. Jesus is son of David, son of Abraham. He's the one from David's loins who is a Jew from David or from Abraham, and he's the one of David's heritage. Matthew chapter 1, verse 1. The book of the genealogy of Jesus Christ, the son of Abraham, son of David, the son of Abraham. Matthew wrote his gospel, we said, somewhere around 60 AD, a few years before Rome came in and destroyed Jerusalem. People, I'm sorry? 60, around 60 AD. It's been about 30 years after Jesus' death. That's not an exact date, but just a general date. We know it before the destruction of Jerusalem, because he would have mentioned that.
About 30 years after Jesus died.
Jesus died somewhere 30-ish, AD, 33, people say. Hard to get specific on some of those dates. Somebody wants to get specific, I'm going to say, that's right. I'm not going to argue with them because I can't tell them they're wrong. But we know the time frame, the first 30 years of Christ anyway. Anyway, before Rome came in and started tearing up stuff, and so when Matthew wrote this down and people read it, they're going to say, well, I can check this out, You claim he's the son of David. I can go to the temple and pull those records and make sure. But they didn't do that. No one challenged it because they knew. Anybody who would write that down, they knew it could be checked. And maybe somebody did go and check. But it was easily verified. So for Matthew to have written it down and if it was false, what are the Jews going to do? When they start making accusations against Christ, what are they going to do? They're going to tear up that genealogically. Look, you said he was son of David, and we trace his genealogy back, and he is not son of David. Nobody ever said that. Because they knew it was a provable thing. They would have, if they could have disproven it, they would have gladly done so. So they're going to check him out to make sure he has the right to make this claim. And if somebody says they're a son of Levi, well, they're going to check it out because you can't be a priest if you're not a son of Levi. If somebody says you're a son of Reuben, who cares? I don't know. But you say you're a son of Judah, son of David, you're going to have to prove that because that has a lot of weight in that culture in that time. If they could have disproved it, they would have gladly have done so. So the genealogy proves that Jesus was Jewish, he's son of Abraham. The genealogy proves that he was eligible for the claim of king because he was son of David. The dominant theme throughout the book of Matthew is that Jesus is the king and he has come to set up his kingdom. John preached, and we'll talk about this later, not today, but we'll talk about it, that the kingdom of God is at hand, and the one whose shoes I am not worthy to bend down and unleash, he's the one who's going to bring it in. So the theme of Matthew is Jesus is the king, and he's come to set up his kingdom. He starts out by laying this foundation with a list that tells us he has the right of birth to be king. By birthright, he can be. He doesn't. Not everybody who's a son of David. David had. There are many people who could have directed their lineage back down to David, but being a son of David was not the only qualification. It's one qualification. You got to be that, and Jesus was that. And there'll be other qualifications that we'll look at as we continue. As you read down through these names, you'll find some interesting names that you probably wouldn't expect to be publicized in the king's genealogy. I mean, if you or I were writing a book about a guy that we want to hold up to the community or the nation or the world for everybody to see just how great he is, who are you going to put in the genealogy? We're going to put the good folks. Those black sheep that are in there, we're going to try to smudge that name a little bit. What's that in there? I don't know. We're not going to put them all in there because we don't want to disparage him. We want to lift him up. So we leave out the bad guys, put in the good guys. That's not what Matthew did. By inspiration of the Holy Spirit, Matthew wrote them all in. Well, he didn't write them all in. He did actually leave some out. We'll talk about why he did that in a moment. But he wrote good and bad names in there. The names are divided up into three sections. Those between Abraham and David, those between David and the Babylonian captivity, and those between the Babylonian captivity and the time of Jesus' birth. Verse 17 says, so all the generations from Abraham to David are 14 generations, from David unto the Babylonian captivity are 14 generations, and from the captivity in Babylon to Christ are 14 generations. He put each section into 14 names. If we know anything about history, biblical history, Scripture, what it says in Scripture, we can check it out, we can find out Matthew messed up. Because there's more than 14 names. Now, he only wrote down 14, but there's more than 14 names in some of those sections. We don't know how many there were in the last section because that's uninspired. That's during the silent years, during the time between Malachi and Matthew. And we don't know anything about that as far as from inspired information. We don't know anything about that. But during the first two sections, or from the first two sections, he put 14 names apiece, and he left some out. So why did he do that? Why did he leave out names? Did he leave out the really, really bad guys? Or just put in the bad guys but leave out the really, really bad guys? And if he's going to, if we're going to leave out names, let's leave out the bad guys and just put the good ones. Why did he choose the ones that he did, and why did he not choose the ones that he did? Well, my first question is, why didn't the Jews, if that's an issue, why didn't the Jews to whom Matthew wrote, or the early Christians to whom Matthew wrote who were Jewish, why didn't they catch that? They knew the Jewish history. They had the law read to them on a regular basis. They went every Sabbath day, had the law. They knew those names. They were made to memorize basically the old law, and it would have the Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, and they would have known that Matthew made a mistake. But some of those names are missing. And why are they missing? Why didn't they catch that? Why didn't they talk about it? Well, I can only speculate, but I figure they probably thought it was no big deal because they knew they could go to the temple and check it out. And Matthew knew they could go to the temple and check it out. So there must have been a reason why he did it. Well, 14, 14, 14. Is there anything about the numbers? Well, not so much. Symbolically, you get into Revelation, and somebody said 14, okay, I try to figure out what the symbol was. What he's doing is breaking them down into memorizable lists. All Jews memorize the list of their ancestors. But if you live in the year 30 or 60 AD, and you got to trace it all the way back to 1500 BC, that's how many generations? I'm not going to do the math, but that's 1,500 years of names that you got to remember. They didn't do that. They didn't memorize them all. They would break them down to lists. And why they left the ones out that they did, I don't know. But they would break them down to lists that they could memorize. They knew that if they had to, they would go to the temple and check out the records. But as far as if you're my daughter or my son, I want to tell you about your grandparents or your great grandparents, I'm just going to try to make it easy for you and break it down into a list of 10, a list of 20, a list of not 500 names, because you can't do it. Most of us couldn't remember back that far. So they broke it down into sections, or they made it a memorizable way in each family. And each family's list, of course, would be different. If they needed a detailed list for political reasons or for legal reasons, go to the temple, get your list. But just for the passing down of generation to generation, just make it as simple as you can to memorize for kids so that they can do it. Matthew gives his audience enough to know that this claim was legitimate. And I don't think there's any rhyme or reason as to why, or at least I'm not aware of any rhyme or reason as to why he left out the ones that he did. But he did leave out some. All of them aren't there. But the ones, my second question, if I can explain it or understand it, that he just left some out, not because he didn't like them or because they were extra bad guys, but he was just trying to make it easy for the first century Christians to memorize the list so that they can say Jesus had a legitimate claim to the throne. If you want to check it out at the temple, you can check it out. You can fill in the rest of the names. You and I, if we were to try to make a list of the people that we know from the Bible, we'd leave out some because they just weren't as popular a name, not the names that we like as much or whatever. We'd, in order to memorize them, we'd probably leave some of them out. But my second question is, why did he choose the names that he did? Why did he leave out the ones that he did? And again, I can't really give you a definite answer as to why he left out the ones that he did, but the peculiar thing is the ones that he chose. First of all, if you're going to list only the good guys between Abraham and Jesus, when Jesus is the person of comparison, who is the good guy? What name is Jesus? There are no good guys. When you compare them to Jesus, there are no good guys. All of them are sinners. So he included both the good guys and the bad guys, and that's what I want to look at for a few moments. Got about 15 minutes to do what I want to do. Abraham, verse 2, Abraham begat Isaac, Isaac begat Jacob, Jacob begat Judah and his brothers. Judah begat Perez and Zerah by Tamar. Perez begat Hezron. Hezron begat Ram. Abraham, well, he's the opposite. You got to put in Abraham. He's the first. He's the first Jew. He was the father of the Jewish nation. You can't start with Abraham in your genealogy, then you can't prove that you're Jewish. You're not Jewish if you don't have Abraham in there. But what do we know about Abraham? If you were to pick the top 10 good guys of the Bible, would Abraham make the list? Yeah, probably so. But he was the one who was called by God. We have 13 and a half chapters depicting for us or detailing for us 100 years of his life, and we can learn a lot of great things that Abraham was and that Abraham did. But when we think about the fact that God called Abraham out of Ur of the Chaldees, Joshua mentioned something about that in Joshua chapter 1. And he referred to the fact that those who were called from there, those our first forefathers, were pagans. He's talking about Abraham. Abraham was called out of paganism. Before he became a Jew, or before he was considered Jewish, he was a pagan. Paul actually makes an argument about that in the book of Romans, I believe, that you're going to study eventually. He says, you Jews claim that you're children of Abraham, and that it's by faith, Abraham's faith, that you're saved. But Abraham, he was a Gentile. He was a Gentile who, when God called him. I'm not going to go into the book of Romans to make that argument, but the idea is that Abraham wasn't always a good guy. Took him 25 years to develop a usable faith. And faith usable by God. How long have y'all been in church? Oh, you on? 1998. So not everybody can say they've been in the church for 25 years. But in 25 years, how much work has God had to work on you, or in all your life, how much work has God had to do? God had to do a lot of work on Abraham to get him from the time of the call to the time that he offered Isaac on the altar. There was a lot of work that had to go on in that time. He's the guy who saved his own skin, or attempted to. He predetermined to save his own skin by telling Sarah, you know, if we get over there and they think you're my wife, they're going to kill me and take you. So when we get there, just lie to them and tell them that you're my sister. Not once, but twice. Threw his wife under the bus and able to save his own skin. That's not commendable, is it? Is that what you're looking for in a fella, in a man? Somebody who's going to throw you under the bus and save his own skin? Well, Abraham did that. And I'm not trying to diminish Abraham. I'm just saying that even the good guys in the list, they have some work done. Isaac, he's not the perfect picture of fatherhood. He chose one son over another. And there's Jacob, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. Even his name today, or later on in the Bible, I don't know if it initially started out that way, but it came to mean deceiver. I think originally it meant usurper, or one who usurped, but it came to mean one who deceived. He's a guy who for years played fast and loose with the rules in order to get ahead. He'll do whatever it takes to get ahead. He said, I believe in God, but I'm going to do what I got to do to get ahead. Esau, y'all know him, don't you? He's the brother to Jacob. And we know Esau's story, right? But you did research on it this week, right? That was your homework. Remember Herod? When we left last week, I said Herod was an Edomite or an Idumean. It's just two different ways of saying the same word. And what does that mean? Anybody look it up? He's a descendant of Esau. The people of Esau eventually became known as the people of Edom. They settled in the land of Edom, so they became Edomites. And Herod was an Edomite or an Idumean. And so the question is, we won't get into it tonight. The question is, what's Herod, an Idumean, doing on a Jewish throne? When he's called King of the Jews. And the Jews, they like that? Okay. They didn't like him. They didn't like him at all. They didn't have any choice. Rome put him on the throne, and he promoted himself so he could get that position by Rome. He went to a lot of work to get into that position to be put there by Rome, and the Jews hated it. They hated it. They didn't have a choice. Herod was the king and put there by Rome, and they were under the yoke of Rome. We'll talk about that more later. Judah. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, the fourth son of Jacob was Judah. He's the one that's in the line of Jesus. Now, this guy's a real winner. If you look back at the history of Judah, you're going to find some good things. He did some commendable things. And the woman by whom he produced his child that's in the list is Tamar. Now, she's the first woman listed. Abraham and Sarah. Sarah's not listed. And Jacob and Jacob actually had 4 wives, didn't he? Yeah, and Isaac and Rebekah, Jacob and Leah and Rachel and Bilhah and Zilpah, I think it was. Anyway, their wives aren't mentioned, but when we come to Judah, we have the wife. Well, funny story there. It's not his wife. Tamar. You know the story? It's a good time to get acquainted with the story then. He begat Perez and Zerah by Tamar. According to the story, you may tell it to you or read it to you. I'll do my best to tell it to you. You can check me out by looking in the text in Genesis chapter 38. According to the story, Judah married a Canaanite woman, something he wasn't supposed to have done anyway. And by her, he had 3 sons. Their names were Onan, and Shelah, Shelah. The firstborn, married a woman by the name of Tamar. But God killed him because he was wicked. Don't know what he did. The text just says in verse 7 of chapter 38 of Genesis that because of his wickedness, God killed him before they had any children. Jewish law says that if my wife and I are married, but I die before she has children, then my father can tell her to marry my brother, or tell my brother to marry her. And when they have kids, or at least their firstborn, that child will be my child, to keep my name alive in the inheritance. But if I didn't give children, my name disappears. And God said, I want to prevent that. So the widow was to marry the brother of her husband. Now, if there wasn't a brother, I don't know what they did. There's probably a thing that they did, I don't know what it was. At any rate, so Judah was required to give Tamar to Onan. Now, Onan, I think, probably was already married. So now he has a second wife. And the firstborn son of Onan and Tamar will get the larger inheritance. He's going to get his older brother's inheritance. Remember, the Jews, the firstborn son got a double inheritance, the secondborn son, and the others, they divided what's left. So if there's $100, and there's 3 kids, then the oldest kid gets 50, and the 2 other kids split 25, or have 25 apiece. Well, Onan, when died, he's automatically, in his mind anyway, the firstborn son. So now he gets a double inheritance. But if he has to marry Tamar and have a child by her, and that child gets the firstborn son's inheritance, and Onan gets killed. So he said, I ain't going to do it. And the Bible says he spilled the seed on the ground, and God struck him dead. You have a responsibility here, so God killed it. So Tamar's still without children, and now without her second husband. If you're Judah, what are you going to do? I'm not giving that woman any more of my kids. Every time she gets married to one of my kids, he dies or gets killed. So he tells her that he's by law required to give Shelah, or Tamar to Shelah, so that she can have kids through him for the firstborn son, her first husband, But Judah said, well, Shelah's too young, hang on, time's right, I'll give you a call. Well, years go by, and Tamar never gets the call. She's still wearing her garments of widowhood. I don't know how many years this is, but she's still wearing her garments of widowhood. Well, the story says that Judah's wife died, and he was going off on business to a sheep shearing convention. He was going off to shear sheep. And while he was gone away from town, he decided that he saw a prostitute. No, get the story straight. Tamar, knowing the ways of men, knew that when they go off sheep shearing, they're doing more than shearing sheep. They're playing around. At any rate, she dressed up as a prostitute, covered her face as a prostitute would during that time. And when Judah saw her, by the way, he says, well, can I come into you? Well, certainly you can. He doesn't know it's Tamar. So he goes in, has a relationship with her, gets pregnant with twins. And he, well, I left my wallet at home. And Tamar says, that's no good. Well, what can you give me then, she says, that to pay me? He says, tell you what, I'll give you my signet ring, my staff, and there's one other thing. I forget what the other thing is. Signet ring and staff, I've got it in my notes somewhere. But we're running out of time, so I won't have to look it up. I give him my signet ring, my staff, and this other thing. And when I get home, I'll send you payment and you send me back my stuff. And Judah was true to his word. When he got home, he sent the payment was a young goat, but he sent a young goat. And when the person who took the young goat to find Tamar got to the place where Tamar was, Tamar was not there. And so he searches around, tries to find Tamar. There is no Tamar. Where's the prostitute that sits by the whatever? And they said, there is no prostitute that sits by the whatever. So he goes back home and says, Judas is gone. There's nobody there. And Judas just thinks he's been taken. And lost his signet ring, his staff, and he's not going to make a big deal about it because he's going to have to tell everybody, well, I sleep with a prostitute and lost my stuff. And so he says, no, I won't do that. We'll just let it bygones be bygones. 3 months later, Tamar shows up and she's pregnant, 3 months pregnant. And Judah said to be mad. You prostitute, you whatever he wanted to call her, because she's pregnant. She's not supposed to be pregnant because she belongs to Sheila. And Tamar's thinking, well, you never gave me Sheila. And so they got her in, and he condemned her, take her out. They're supposed to stone her. He says, take her out and burn her. And she says, you do what you have to do, Judah, but I'll tell you what. She brings out the staff, the signet ring, and that other thing, whatever it was, and he said, it's by the man who don't belong to these things, by whom I'm pregnant. What Judah did. He's catched. He's caught. So, he ends up, I think, marrying, don't quote me on this, but I think he ends up marrying Tamar. At any rate, this is in the genealogy of Jesus. Now, if I was writing the genealogy of Jesus, I'm going to try to find a way to leave that out. Not only does he not leave it out, but he puts in there Tamar's name. They could have just said Judah begat Perez, and everybody would just not know the difference. Because if I'd said that tonight, y'all wouldn't have known the difference. You would have, because it's a new story. But if I just said Judah begat Perez, you wouldn't have known the difference. It's just like Abraham begat Isaac and Jacob. But there's a story there. Matthew says, check it out. Tamar, twins. And you got to read about the birth of the twins in that same chapter. The first, or Perez and Zerah, his arm came out of the womb first. And they tied a string around it, just to say that he was the firstborn. But then he withdrew his arm. This is when he was baby in the womb. And the other one was born first. And the one with the red string came out second. So that caused all kind of interesting story. I don't know that that had a whole lot to do with the life of Christ, but the thing I wanted to bring it up was this story, this horrendous story, was in the life of Christ. I'm sorry? Genesis chapter 38. Let me go back and make sure it's not 37. I think it's Genesis 38. Yes, Genesis 38. Basically the whole chapter. Interesting story. If you skip on down in the genealogical record, you'll find another one. There's I think 5 women mentioned. First one is Tamar, who played the part of the prostitute, whether or not she was a prostitute, but she ended up taking payment for having sex, so she was a prostitute, at least at that moment. Then we find another person by the name of Rahab. If I say the name Rahab, what's the next 2 words that come up? Rahab, the harlot. Everybody knows Rahab, the harlot. We can't hardly say her name without saying the harlot. So there's another prostitute. She was not only a prostitute, but a Gentile prostitute. She was from Jericho. Now she did a good thing. She saved the spies that Israel had sent into Jericho, and they ended up saving her. Made a vow to save her. She becomes the great grandmother of David. Keep moving down, verse 5, you find the name of Ruth. I can't say anything bad about Ruth, can you? Ruth. She's the one who said, where thou goest, I will go. Talking to Naomi. Wherever you go, wherever you sleep, I'm going to take care of you. The other girl, the other daughter-in-law, she took off. And Naomi said, go back to your people, You went back to her people. But Ruth said, no, you're my mother-in-law. I'm going to take care of you. Your son, your husband's dead, your sons are dead. I'm going to take care of you. So where do you go? I will go. Where do you lodge? I will lodge. And it's just a wonderful romantic story between not only Ruth and Naomi, but Ruth and the husband that she ends up finding, Boaz, thank you. But the thing about Ruth was, she's a Moabitess. He's not a Jew. Naomi's kids, what's Naomi's husband? Starts with an M. Can't call it. Well, Mr. M, we'll call him, because I can't think of his name. They left Canaan and went to Moab during a famine. They weren't supposed to do that. They're supposed to stay in Canaan. But anyway, they did. And when they got there, boys liked what they saw. They got married to Canaanite women or Moabite women. And eventually the boys died or were killed. And Naomi or Ruth comes back. Ruth, the daughter-in-law Ruth comes back with Naomi to Canaan. But she was a Moabitess. You weren't supposed to marry a Moabite. Where did Moabites come from? Well, their ancestors. Who were their ancestors? Another not good story. Abraham, or you know who Lot is? Lot was Abraham's nephew. He went off to the valley of Sodom and Gomorrah, the 5 cities of Sodom and Gomorrah. He went to Sodom. Became pretty much like the people of Sodom. His whole family was ruined. And God eventually said to Abraham, I'm going to kill him. I'm going to destroy Sodom. Abraham differed with God. He said, if I can find, 50 was the first number? If I can find 50 righteous souls, will you save them? Yeah, I'll do it. If I can find 40, but yeah, I'll save them. 30, if I can find 5 righteous souls, will you say, I'll save them for 5. Lot and his family were there. 5 righteous souls could not be found. But God did send angels to Sodom. He pulled Lot and his family out. Some of the families didn't want to come. They mocked him. His wife came, and she looked back and turned into a perpendicular column of sodium chloride. So, but anyway, it turned to a pillar of salt because she wasn't supposed to look back. She told him not to. And his daughters came with him. Well, his daughters are with Lot. They have no man. So they get Lot drunk one night, and the first daughter has sex with her dad, and conceived. They get drunk, Lot drunk the second night, and has sex with that. She conceived. One of her children's name was Hammon, the other was Moab. That's where we get Moab. They were part Jewish, but they were enemies of Israel. All right, we've gone past our time. Can you give us 5 more minutes so I can finish this point? David, good guy, bad guy? We want to think David's a good guy because he killed Goliath and he was king of Israel for 40 years. But look what it says: David the king begat Solomon by her who had been the wife of Uriah. And there's that whole sordid story. Matthew didn't go into detail, but when he mentioned it, everybody knew the details. That David committed adultery with Bathsheba. They didn't name Bathsheba, just said wife of Uriah, and got caught in it in the sense that Bathsheba conceived while Uriah was out on the battlefield. So he calls Uriah back in and says, go have sex with your wife so that you can get the monkey off my back. But Uriah wouldn't do it. He said, my fellows are out there fighting. You want me to go home and put my feet up? I'm not going to do it. He's an honorable man. And ended up, David tried 3 times to get him to do it, and he wouldn't do it. So David sent him back to the battlefield with a message to the captain or the general that says, put Uriah in the front of the line and draw back. Uriah took his own death warrant, didn't know it, but he took his own death warrant to the general. David was the general with it. He did. He went to the heat of battle, sent Uriah to the front, and had his army draw back, and Uriah was killed. David made Bathsheba's son. The conceived child died. The one that was conceived in adultery. But Solomon was later born to Bathsheba, the wife of Uriah. And Solomon, he's a good guy, right? Wisest man in all the earth. He's the wisest foolish man who ever lived. Man had 1,000 wives, broke every rule of the book for kings. God gave some rules about what kings should and should not do. Solomon broke every rule of the book. He worshipped pagan gods. He multiplied horses and chariots from Egypt, showing his lack of faith in God. He multiplied wives to himself. He made servants or slaves of his people. This is the great grandfather of Jesus. The next section gives us a list of kings that came from David. Murderer's Row. There are a few good guys in this list, but Rehoboam. What good can you say about Rehoboam? He's a guy who heard good advice, heard bad advice, says, I want the bad advice. He's a guy who made people serve even more severely than his father Solomon. Ahaz sacrificed his sons to the fires of Molech. He replaced the altar of God with one like unto Assyria's. He plundered the temple to bribe Assyria. He worshipped idol nations around about him. He built high places in every city. Manasseh rebuilt the altars to Baal that his father had torn down, put idols up in the temple, sacrificed his son to Chemosh, I believe it was, practiced sorcery, killed innocent people, was taken captive to Babylon. These are the people that are in the genealogical of Jesus. The last part of the list, we don't know anything about these guys. We know that they were part of the list and could have been confirmed by those who read the list initially, but these were men whose names came in the silent years. And the last two lists, the names on the list are Joseph and Mary. We'll talk about them in a later lesson.
So who was the fifth lady? I got Tamar, Rahab, Bathsheba, Mary. Okay, that's it.
Yeah, okay.
Tamar, Ruth, Rahab, Bathsheba, and Mary.
She's the fifth lady, Mary. Why did God do this? These are an inspired text. Why does God put these bad guys? They're all bad guys. We can't name one guy in the list that was always good. I mean, Job is not in the list, and Job's the best guy we can read about in the Old Testament. Daniel's not in the list. He's one of the best guys we can read. Noah's not in the list. He's one of the best guys we can read about in the, of course, Noah is in the list. He's just not mentioned in the list because it was before Abraham. But Job and Daniel, they're not in the list. But these guys, all these bad, terrible guys, we can find a few good things about some of them, but all of them are, even the best ones. David did several horrible things. My thinking is God wants these people on the list, first of all, so we can see Jesus is different from them. But also help us understand that Jesus came to save us from what destroys these evils. Jesus is the Savior, and he came from the men, but it's a list showing us the grace of God. It's by the grace of God that God even allowed for the time to come that Jesus would come. I mean, people were so corrupt that he could have at any point said, you know what, I'm done. But it's by the grace of God that he brought Jesus into the world to save us from our sins, in which we want to talk about David and Manasseh and all the bad things they did, but we don't want to make a list of all the bad things we've done. We have guilt, just like they did. God brought Jesus into the world through guilty men in order to save guilty men. All right, we'll stop there. We'll pause there anyway. Let me get over here to my recording, see what I can do about pausing the recording. We'll take a 10-minute break, and we'll come back. I think I've lost Vincent anyway. Oh, there's Vincent. He's there. All right. I'm gonna pause recording Vincent for a few minutes. I'll unpause it in order to let you know that we're back, but, then I'll pause it again during the. Did you, Vincent, are you still there? There you are.
I'm still here.
Did you by chance get the movie yet or the video?
I have not gotten it yet. I'm going to the library this week or either Barnes and Noble to see can I get it.
You probably won't be able to get it there. They're probably not going to have it, but you can go to Focus on the Family. Google or the website of Focus on the Family and type in that the world may know. Where do you live?
I'm in Clayton County.
Clayton County. If I send you a copy of the video, will you send it back to me?
Repeat that.
I've got an extra copy of the video. One that belongs. I have a personal copy, and my church has a copy as well. If I send it to you, will you send it back to me?
Sure.
All right. Email me your mailing address, and I'll get that in the mail to you tomorrow.
Okay, I'll do that. Thank you.
I'll be glad to help you out since I can, but please send it back to me. But I'll get that. Send me your email address, and I'll get that in the mail to you. I apologize that I can't just show it to you on screen, but it's, I can't. I don't want to go to jail.
I understand.
So I'm going to pause the recording right now so that you don't have to stare at blank space. But I'll unpause it, let you know that the video started, and I'll pause it again. All right?
Okay.
All right.
Yes, sir. All right.
All right. Vincent, did you bring the popcorn? They didn't bring the popcorn. Did you bring the popcorn? For the film? I'm not got any sound.
I brought a cereal.
You got cereal? Well. All right, can you hear me fine? I'm going to put the video on the screen here on the wall, actually. I'm just going to leave this thing running. You're not going to be able to see it. I'm just going to leave this running. Maybe you can hear it. I don't think it's going to violate anything. Actually, I think the first lesson on some of his videos is free anyway, so you can buy it. So
Okay.
I'm going to let it run, let the recording continue, but I'm not going to point the camera at the screen. It's a short video. I think it says 16 minutes or something like that. Some of them are 20 minutes. We're going to talk about the video afterwards, but try to pay attention to what he's saying. He's got a lot of good things to say. He is as far as I know, a Hebrew scholar. He has sat at the feet of Jewish rabbis to learn Jewish culture, and he has been many times to what's called the Holy Land to investigate. He's not an archaeologist, I don't think, but he deals a lot with archaeology. This is not going to be a documentary film type thing where he's just boring us to tears about what he finds. I think it's really interesting. I hope you find this interesting as I do. But there's a lot to be learned here, and we'll try to figure out afterwards some of the things that we can learn. I hope it's still running.
Mike, I email you my mailing address.
Okay. What's that? But we may not watch it after all. Oh. It shut itself off. We'll let it get by. Can you see it okay, Ms. Mendota? Yeah. Okay.
Júlio, esse irmão metido aqui na cabeça,
The ancient land of Israel is a testimony, an evidence of the greatness of what God did in that country, a testimony to the truth of the words that we find in the pages of the Bible. The people who lived here have left behind a record, an indelible record, if you will, of their lives. An important part of that record is the cities where they lived, ancient piles of debris that contain their culture, architecture, art, their diet, the weapons they used, and even on occasion, their writings. These piles of ancient cities, often built one on top of the other, are called tells. People in ancient times tended to build and live in the same places, maybe because there were occupations there, or a main road went nearby, or maybe, most likely of all, a source of fresh water. And as archaeologists began to peel away the layers of this ancient civilization, the culture and even the people of the Bible come to light. I'd like to ask you to join us on this adventure. We're going to try and understand the people, the context of the Bible. It'll mean some extra hiking, some climbing, some travel to out-of-the-way places, but the end result, I think, will be well worth the effort as we discover again that God's Word, God's message, is as relevant for us as it was for them. The location Herod picked for the awesome fortress that he named after himself, the Herodium, is a place, an area rich in biblical history. Jacob buried his beloved Rachel just over here on the hills near Bethlehem. Sometime later, two women coming down out of the hills toward this area, as Naomi and Ruth came back from their time when they were away because the land had been under famine. Ruth goes down to one of the fields below and begins to glean from a farmer named Boaz. Ruth and Boaz are married and eventually become the great-great-grandparents of David. And young David becomes the newly anointed king of Israel, the one whose reign and even whose character would become the pattern for the Messiah to come. And finally, the greatest act, the greatest historical event of all, the birth of Jesus. As the sun rises and sets on the Judean mountains, the shadow of the Herodium is thrown on the small villages around, including Bethlehem itself. And somewhere within that shadow, Jesus was born. The palace fortress that Herod built here was the third largest in the entire world at the time, and certainly one of the most glorious. It's divided into an upper and a lower palace, covering more than 45 acres of territory. The upper palace can be seen for miles. Around the outside, double walls about 15 feet apart, and between those two walls, the chambers and rooms that were necessary for all of his servants and palace staff. On each of the four sides of that upper fortress, a tower several stories high. In these towers were the rooms for the royal family and the government officials. And on the east, the greatest tower of all, more than 100 feet high, where Herod and his own family could live and catch the breezes from the Mediterranean on hot summer days. When one walks through the glory of this palace complex, we're struck by the great vision and the great power that was Herod. And it becomes more obvious what an act of faith it was for the Jewish people to be willing to commit to the fact that Jesus was Messiah and King. The place is called the Herodian, built by King Herod. If you look here to the east, you can see in the distance the water of the Dead Sea. And just beyond the water, the mountains across the Dead Sea, the mountains of Moab. And then coming from the Dead Sea in this direction, you see the hills of the Judea wilderness. Notice how clearly the wilderness begins and the farmland ends. To the west of us, the Judea mountains. You can see that block of mountains not so very far away from here, almost straight across from us, the Valley of Elah. Just a little bit to our north, kind of sprawling down the hillside over here, you see the town of Bethlehem. Today a pretty large city, pretty modern city in a way. You sit then at the edge of Bethlehem, which is a frontier town. Very clear distinction between the wilderness out here, the land of the shepherd. We've seen the green pastures. David wrote about the green pastures, and if you want to see the green pastures he's talking about, you need to look to the east, because that's where the shepherd went. The shepherd wouldn't come here on the farmland, because as you can tell, there's not a lot of good farmland, so the shepherd stays out there, and the farmer goes over here. The structure we're actually sitting on takes us to the New Testament time. Herod was living and ruling in Jerusalem, but his fear, of course, was Cleopatra to the south and west. And so he had a line of escape routes that allowed him to leave Jerusalem, to come down to this area only in about 8 or 10 miles or so and to find safety. And then just beyond us, Masada, and very soon he'd be back home to where he came from, which is the country of Idumea. One of the largest palaces in the world. The whole complex itself may have been several hundred acres of area. Down below, a huge swimming pool, colonnade around it, a beautiful garden with all kinds of exotic plants. Then up on the top of this hill stands the fortress called the Herodian. You can see across the diameter of this huge open area here, and several stories still left of that glorious palace that was open to the sky. We're sitting on the defensive tower. And again, you see the diameter. That tower probably went 60, 70 feet in the air. Kind of stood here as a lookout. You could see it for miles and miles and miles. So you need to feel the dominance of Herod in this particular place. Josephus does tell us that Herod was buried here. He died in Jericho, and the funeral procession Josephus describes comes up from Jericho through that wilderness and then comes down in a glorious funeral procession, and somewhere, without Josephus telling us where, Herod was buried. And as far as scholars know, his body was never found. The reason we really come here for our faith lesson is because of its proximity to Bethlehem. I want you to have a sense of where Bethlehem was and what the land around Bethlehem is like. I like to think that Bethlehem probably looked very much like that little village on top of the hill over there. Isaac prayed to the Lord on behalf of his wife because she was barren. The Lord answered his prayer, and his wife Rebekah became pregnant. The babies jostled each other within her, and she said, "Why is this happening to me?" So she went to ask the Lord. The Lord said, "Two nations are in your womb. Two peoples from within you will be separated. One people will be stronger than the other, and the older brother will become the younger brother's servant. So Esau is born, he's the older. And Jacob is born, and he's the younger. Out of Jacob comes the Jews. And out of Esau comes the people of Edom, who live down across the Dead Sea, but to the south a ways, in the mountains of Edom. But the prophecy was that the older Esau and his family will serve the younger Jacob. In fact, that's even reiterated, if I could read it, in the book of Numbers, where that prophet, just across the sea from us here, the prophet Balaam said, a star will come out of Jacob, a scepter out of Israel, Jacob's other name, and he will crush Edom. Edom will be conquered, but Israel will grow strong. Jacob will be strong. So the Jewish people had in their minds that ultimately someday that line of Jacob was going to be in power. But we're sitting in a strange place here, because you see, Herod was from Idumea. Herod was an Edomite. Herod was a descendant of Esau. And all the glory and all the power and everything magnificent in the whole world belonged to Herod. And in that town over there, a baby is born, and you're asked to believe that that baby is the descendant of Jacob, who is Lord and King of everything. I want you to look at where you are, because this whole countryside and every town and village and every place in it is dominated by what stands right here. Look what Herod left. Glorious. I mean, unbelievable stuff. He was an awesome builder and king. But it's all in ruins. And for most of you, if not all of you, the only thing you ever knew about Herod was that he killed little babies at Christmas time. Because Herod was just in it for himself. And worse than that, he was as much of a descendant of Edom spiritually as he was physically. Jesus, as far as I know, he didn't leave one single building. Not one stone you can point on that he ever touched, for sure. Not even a mark on the place he was born. Probably don't even know the place where he died and rose again, at least not for sure. But look what he left behind. The world has never been the same. We come as 33 people of varying degrees of influence. But I don't think anyone would look at us and say that we're the power brokers in our world. There are no presidents here. There are no Supreme Court justices. There are no famous movie actors. There are no great musicians or professional athletes, at least not yet. But you know what? When we look at our world, the power, particularly the power of evil, seems to be so big and so strong and so awesome that what could we 33 people do? But you know what you're asked to believe? That no matter what it looks like out there, no matter how big Hollywood looks, no matter how powerful Wall Street looks, no matter how evil pornography seems, no matter how undefeatable hunger and racism and AIDS appear to be, Jesus Christ is King. It's not Herod. It's not the devil. It's not evil. It's God. Now, there weren't many people that could come and look at that baby and say, I believe it. Now, the question that I have for you and that I have to answer for myself is, do you dare to live as if God is stronger than the evil we face in our own lives and in our own culture? Do you dare to live as if the power we have with us is greater than any power in anything you face in your life that's against you? And I maintain we haven't lived that way. I maintain we've lived as if Herod, or the modern Herod, meaning the evil power of today, is really the stronger. And so we've gone to our convents and our monasteries and we've said evil is too big, too strong. God is not big enough, strong enough to do what we want him to do. People, this palace, this fort right here says no matter what it looks like, no matter how strong it seems, no matter how glorious it is, It's the baby in the manger that's Lord of heaven and earth. And so Matthew the Jew starts his gospel story about Jesus with these incredible words. In the days of Herod the king, Jesus was born. The house not big, too big. We've seen our months in later than and look at it's not evil with us. It's good in the modern Herod, meaning the evil power of the says no matter what it looks like.
That's the, doesn't look very spectacular to us because we live in 2001, 2017. All that dirt that you see mounded up there, that hill before Herod, that hill wasn't there. See the land around that, what it is, kind of rolling hills? Herod had slaves put the hill there. This guy was a master builder. He hired an architect, or he was that talented himself, but here it is 2,000 years later, and his fortress is still standing. And we can still, there's a lot of it ruins, but a lot of it's still there. And what he had then, what would you compare that to? If we lived in that day and we saw that, and we come to our day and time trying to make a comparison, what would it be? This is amazing. He lived in all the luxury and splendor that he wanted to live in. And for this film and for our class tonight, true or false, what he said, what we knew of Herod was he killed the babies at Christmas time. Right? That's all we know. That's all we ever saw that. There's a whole lot more to Herod. And when we study the life of Christ, life and ministry of Christ, we need to know about Herod. This is not a class on Herod, but we need to know the influences that were there. This was, when the sun comes up in the morning, this hill, this Herodian, literally, as he says, casts a shadow on the land of Bethlehem. And it's just, Jesus was born in the shadow of that. And to me, he points it out as well as anybody that I've ever seen. I love his films. Recording this, but what impresses you? Maybe you're not as impressed with it as I am, but what impresses you most about the Herodian?
I'm impressed by the architect.
He didn't have bulldozers.
No, he didn't.
He didn't have those cranes. You go downtown Atlanta and they're building these monstrosity buildings, but they have these cranes. They're picking stuff up. They build the interstate and they can move things around. He had people and no machines. All machines were hand run. They were,
And it's still standing 2,000 years later.
granted, I guess today, the people who take care of it, they're making sure it stands. They take care of it, maintain it, just make sure it doesn't fall into any further ruins. But still, 2,000 years later, what other structures do we know that lasted 2,000 years? I built my house 15 years ago. It's already falling apart. But
I'm just for that his actual comments and the way he did it, because the Mediterranean wind is cooling
he was a smart man.
Yeah, and then the position is, on the east side, so because the sun rises in the east and sets in the west, in the morning it's going to be hot towards the middle of the day. So just all of that stuff that goes in that huge food. What better way to entertain, and show your grandeur than something like that? When somebody comes into your land, they never been.
This is one of three things built. This is the only one like this. I think you mentioned that you got the temple up there in Jerusalem where he lived. You got the Herodian here, and you got Masada. We'll talk about Masada in another film. But Ms. Mazel, what do you know? You know anything more about Herod now than you did before? usually people, when we know anything about Herod, it's, you know, he's the guy who killed babies. That's about all we know about him. I'm not trying to build him up.
It's just what it is, you know. Like they say, you have to
He was a
give
great
them-
figure in history.
Yeah.
And then here it is, when you say said it's baby, you're supposed to believe that this baby is the king. And look at this man look at how he thinks, look at how he feels, look at the power that he has, and we're gonna take a step out on faith and believe that this child is the one who's coming to lead us. And that takes some serious conviction.
For you and I, it takes faith. What about the people who lived at that time? I mean, the angels appeared to a shepherd or to the shepherds and say, "Go there and worship the king." He's a babe watching, wrapped in swaddling clothes. They had to pass by this guy to get there. And this guy is the guy who killed his own wife because he thought she was a threat to the throne. He killed his own sons because he thought he was a threat to the throne. And you want me to sneak by the Herodian or wherever they were and go to Bethlehem and worship and call this guy king?
And then he told them, when they found him, to bring him news back about him.
Yeah, so that was the wise men. He told that in Matthew chapter 2. We're going to talk about those wise men. But Herod was no fool, no man's fool. No, he was. He was a man who lived for everything he could get out of this life. Now, what I want to do, we got two kings in front of us. King of the Jews, King of the Jews. One lives here and another two places like that with, you know, his command is what happened. I mean, people, when he said something, people did it, they died. And then you got Jesus, born in a manger, who nobody parents. He's not a political threat, doesn't want to be a political threat. So I want you to, as we look at this, we won't have time to finish tonight, but I want us to compare these two kings and in our minds try to see what each one was. They have absolutely conflicting worldviews. Herod is, give me what I can get, and power and authority and conquest. That's his worldview. That's how he sees things. What about Jesus? When you think of Jesus and his power, what's the difference between his power and Herod's power?
Jesus was love. He was humble with the power that he had.
What do he use his power for?
He was good.
Good. What do he use his power for? Well, not necessarily evil. He was evil. He was an evil man. He did terrible things. He did it to make me feel good. I mean, he was all about pools and protection and security and all about Herod and all the things. You know, he used his power to have his back pocket. And Jesus, he wasn't that way. He says, John chapter 4, verse 34, "My food is to do the will of him who sent me and to finish his work." He says, I can do, what John chapter 5, verse 30, I can do nothing of myself. As I hear, I judge, and my judgment is righteous because I do not seek my own will, but the will of the Father. Herod sought his own will. I'm all about me. Jesus says, I'm all about doing what God says, and what God says is all about you. The thief does not come except to steal and to kill and destroy. I have come that they may have life and that they may have it more abundantly. I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd gives his life for his sheep. A hireling, he who is not a shepherd, he is not the shepherd, one who does not own the sheep, sees the wolf coming, leaves the sheep and flees. The wolf catches the sheep and scatters them. The hireling flees because he is a hireling, does not care about the sheep. I am the good shepherd. I know my sheep, and I am known by my own. So, this is the picture of Jesus. I care about those who are under my charge. Herod says, I don't care about anybody. But if I have to work people to death to bring in mounds of dirt to build me a palace on top of it, that's what I'll do. How many people died making that? And how much did Herod care? They're probably buried in the very thing that he built on. I remember when I went to Russia, when I first went to Russia, we lived in what was a concentration camp back during the time of Stalin. And Stalin had built a railway from Moscow all the way to the North Sea, even the seaport in the north. And so he used his prisoners of war that he got from wherever, and eventually ran out of them and used his own people to build that railway. And I talked to a man who was part of that, and he says there are thousands of people buried under those tracks. They just froze to death. I live in the north part of Russia, and they froze to death, and they killed over and died. They shoveled dirt and kept on going. That's how I see Herod. He just didn't care about people's lives. Jesus said, I came to the will of my Father's will is about you. So when we look at these two kings, who couldn't have been more different, but God has brought them together at the same time. One's on the throne of the Jews, one's the baby. The baby will grow up during this guy's time. Actually, this guy will die about somewhere between 4 and 10 years of Jesus' birth. But neither one of them, or at least Herod, didn't know that at the time. Herod had all the power, and all the wealth, and all the glory, and all the strength, and all the worldly position that the world could offer. And all we have left to him is ruins of a fortress. Jesus, King of the universe, but had nothing to, like this anyway, to demonstrate his power. He changed the world. He changed the world. Go out in the street and find me two people out of 100 who even know the name Herod. Jesus on his king. I want to talk some more about this next week. About out of time. Yay or nay? I like the videos.
Yeah.
I've only seen one, but all of them are like this.
What's his name? Ray
Ray Vander Lam.
Vander?
I'm sure his name's on here somewhere.
Yeah, it was on there. I just didn't get it. It was Ray Vander Lam.
Amazingly, I don't even see his name here.
I guess he must have dedicated it to
Yeah, there it is. Small print. It's just a good, seems like a really good guy. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and close the class. It's about 3 minutes early, but I want to talk about this some more, this video next week. I don't know if we'll watch the second video next week or not. I don't want to make the class about the videos, but I do want to use these videos because I think they will broaden your knowledge of the life and times of Jesus. And that's to me what this class is about. So we can know more from a first century perspective, not just reading the Bible perspective, but putting ourselves in that time frame and seeing what it was like and how he lived and the influence of it. He lived under this king.
Yeah.
Not for a long time, but his son, Herod's son, was the one under whom Jesus lived. His son wasn't much better than this guy, as far as morals and things of that nature goes. So we'll come back to this next week. We will look at the video again, but try to keep this on your mind. We'll talk more about it next week. Thank you for being here today.
Okay, now Ray Vander Lam,
Lamb, L-A-A-N.
he was Jewish.
No, he's not.
He's not Jewish.
He has studied Judaism.
Okay. Okay.
My knowledge, he is not. All right, Vincent, we're going to shut you down.
All right.
See you next week, and I'll send you that information.
Yes, sir. Tell everybody say goodbye.
Everybody, Vincent says bye.
Bye, Vincent.
Bye-bye.
Have a good night.
Good night.